Hola. Bueno, pues hola, buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a Guten.
Welcome to Gutunturia, the International Festival of Arts of Bilbao. Thanks very much for following us through the social media and online. This morning I was talking with one of the coordinators, Raquel, who said that we are going back to radio broadcasting times. We're connecting ourselves through the waves. The difference is that we can see ourselves through the screen. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Imma Prieto, curator, writer, researcher, and I currently direct Esbaluart Museo, a museum of contemporary art in Palma de Mallorca. And I enjoy the presence of two great artists and thinkers. From New York, we have Marta Rosler. It is an honor and a privilege to have her here. She's a North American artist that works with different languages, photography, video installation, sculpture, collage, performance, and her work is very, very heterogeneous and rich. And she engages in dialogue with different semantic fields, sociology, political theory, feminism, economy, etc. It is her desire to reinterpret the present and to connect different times and spaces. And this brings us close to the context of today's session. We also enjoy the presence of Marcelo Expósito, artist, cultural critic, researcher, theorist, with a very rich background. He started working 30 years ago in collaboration with other artists, questioning or challenging the concept of history and the narrative of history, how history is narrated, and from what interests Marcelo during his career has collaborated with many different institutions and organizations and has published many papers, catalogs. There was also a book on Walter Benjamin. In 2015, he published a very interesting book. And the last book he published is titled Discursos Plebeyos, Peasant Discourse, from last year. Before we kick off with this conversation, I'd like to say that Marta and Marcelo are excellent thinkers who express themselves very, very clearly. What they have to say is extremely interesting. We're going to listen to their presentations, then we will have time for a Q&A. I'd like to thank the organizers for putting together this event. We have had some technical issues. I'd like to thank the technicians for their help. I'd also like to thank the Azcuna Bilbao venue team and the director of the Azcuna Bilbao Cultural Center, Fernando, Raquel, and Iván de la Nuez, who has also participated in the organization of these sessions. So now I'm going to give the floor, or rather address the first question. We're going to engage in a conversation in order to surface the concepts that help us interpret the reality we inhabit. I'd like to start off by saying that Marta participated in a project in Palma some months ago, and the title of this project is How We Have Reached Here from There. And this is very close to the title of the festival held in Bilbao, that is titled Aquí, Here. And it's funny because when we started organizing this session, we started to reflect on Martha's space-time dichotomy. We attempt to analyze the present. And this is a paradox in a sense. we've understood that we are living a geopolitical moment, political moment. There's a simultaneity of times and spaces. And we have the feeling that we haven't moved from this place. Marta, I'm thinking about some of your works from the 70s, the semiotics of the kitchen, vital statistics of the citizen. And in those works, you offer a feminist gaze. You criticize how society objectifies the body of women. And these are subject matters that are very, very topical today. Marcelo, in his works, also addresses these concepts. I remember the first time I read No haber olvidado nada, not having forgotten anything, one of his works that he worked on with Mr. Villota. And I also remember another of his titles, The Year the Future Ended, that was published 15 years ago. This is an audiovisual installation that toys with this space-time dichotomy. And now I'm going to give you the floor to reflect on this dichotomy, time-space. And Marta, we can begin with you. How can we talk about this dichotomy, time-space?
The dichotomy between time and space? I'm sorry. It's almost impossible for me to hear what you're saying, including the translation. I tried to signal that. So I sort of followed, but I didn't get the direct question.
Es decir, la pregunta podría ser,
The question would be, do you believe we're going back? And if so, in what sense? Are we
regressing? Are we regressing as a civilization?
no, la cuestión sería,
Whoops.
So my question is, if we analyze your works from the 70s, we see that these are topics that address topics that are very, very much to date these days, feminism, etc. So what has failed for us to continue to talk about these issues? Because we believe that all those topics are still part of our present. Why?
Because we have engaged in a period of regression, social regression. It's, as the old saying goes, one step forward, two steps back. It's easy to point to the changes from the 1970s years ago. I'm having, I apologize, there's some very serious echo. I don't know if this is going to work. The fact is that even though we emerged from a period of authoritarian government, for example, in Spain and Portugal and a number of other places, and also from colonialism, particularly the end of the British Empire, the fact is that the financialization of the economies has meant that there have been moves toward alienation, authoritarianism, which is especially obvious now, for example, in the United States and a number of other Eastern European and other countries outside of Europe. And we can easily point to the period of neoliberalism starting in the 1980s that caused a tremendous transfer of wealth up to the richest people and corporations, which has left people, ordinary people, very upset and they are, to put it bluntly, women are often at the point of the spear of social repression by authoritarian governments and by the anger of people who are constantly being told that control of women is the most important thing that a society can do to hang on to its values. I hope that made some sense. So when it looks like we are fighting the same battles, we are fighting the same battles. And it's interesting that the cultural point of economic change has been, from the right, has been always to point to women as the those who want to upset the social order. Can I just say, however, that, for example, in Argentina and elsewhere in Latin America, there are very robust feminist movements that have managed to gain some say over the control of reproduction. So that's a step forward, but it leads to backlash.
Tú, Marcelo, también has estado
Marcelo, you've always also given voice to feminists over the past years. And you yourself are now in Buenos Aires, something that I forgot to mention in the introductory words. And I follow you on social media, and I see that you're very active, you're very much engaged. And could you give continuity to what Marta was saying? Because these are topics that you also address in your work. First of all, I'd like to thank you for organizing this event. I'd like to thank the Azcuna Center. I'd like to thank Ivan de la Nuez, who is work has been so very important in putting together this session. Imma is a good friend of mine, a wonderful cultural manager. It's great to be here with Imma and with Marta, who has been a master, a teacher for the generation of artists I belong to in Spain. Marta has been a key reference. She has been a master. She has been a teacher for all. And I'd like to thank most sincerely Marta. It's a pleasure for me to engage in this dialogue with her, because she's a role model. She's someone who has inspired me and many other artists. And I very much agree with what Marta has said. And if I may add something, I'd like to say that the situation of a regression, historical regression, is almost like a climatic or climate feeling. And we are currently living a period of crisis. This is the end of a historical cycle, if I may say. It's the end of the historical cycle of neoliberalism, 4 decades of neoliberal politics. And it also coincides with the end of a second historical cycle, which is the capitalist modernist cycle. So the coexistence of these two crises, short-term crisis, neoliberalism and capitalist modernism, causes us this feeling of being frozen in time, so to say. I have the feeling that we are regressing. And as Marta has pointed out, we are in regression in political terms, and we are at a stalemate, or we are on the verge of a collapse, if I may say, in terms of civilization. And in times of crisis, epic battles are waged, and we are now witnessing a huge battle between well, it's the battle to decide what the next scenario will be, what the near future will be. We need to understand that we are living a period in time in which we are fighting to build a scenario that would be like on the one hand, authoritarian politics, and democracy on the other hand. So we are now waging a battle between authoritarianism and democracy. Are we going to radicalize democracy, or are we going to radicalize authoritarian rule? We have the feeling that we are stepping back, but as Marta has mentioned, we are also witnessing major battles. She's mentioned the case of Argentina. In Argentina, on the 8th of March, we've seen the success of the Argentinian feminist narrative. They've been able to secure reproductive and sexual rights. Today, the 24th of March, is the anniversary in Argentina of the latest military coup. And in Argentina, today is a special day. In Argentina, they are living very complex times. But analyzing what is happening there makes me think that the present times and the times of crisis are also times of opportunity. And art and culture have always been experimenting fields that allow us to understand the present times as a sounding board, as a resonance chamber. Since Sam Soleil, Chris Marker's film, and until Godard, we've seen in art how we experiment the present times as a sounding board where the elements of the past, the elements of the present, and the elements of the future reverberate. And I believe that arts, writing, are a territory for experimentation that can help us understand temporality as sounding boards. Sounding boards where we have the coexistence of the different battles, the past battles, the present battles that will shape our future. So what she has said is spot on because it depicts the problems of our times, the problem of time, and that step forward and 2 steps back that she mentioned and that we are constantly seeing in times of crisis. Yes, and let's consider that the title of this festival is Here. And here we are in a conversation between New York, Buenos Aires, and Palma de Mallorca. So the here varies. And it's very important that as you were saying, Marcelo, and as Marta was saying, it is very important that we are very specific, that we're able to talk openly about the things that are happening. And that's what we're going to try to do now. And it's very important that we understand that during the past month, and I like to reflect on feminism. Feminism is a plural movement. I believe we can all agree on this, with very different positions. But in any case, we need to be able of, reaching an agreement in order to make a series of decisions that will help us improve the present times, to help us transform society. And a week ago, we were actually discussing about these issues. We were discussing about the Transgender Act and the possibility of taking this to Congress. And it's very important that we understand feminism from a multiplicity of places. And in Switzerland, 1 month ago, there was a great controversy regarding the desire to forbid the use of burqa. And I'm saying this because it's funny, because in another conference that I attended some weeks ago, someone expressed great fear and said that this ban had been enacted by the far right. But we need to be very, very careful, because putting a tag can be very dangerous. We need to understand the reason behind that criticism. In the museum, Nathanin Armarian, an Iranian politologist, visited us. She is well known by everybody, this Iranian politologist. And she participated in the 70s marches, a feminist movement in Iran. And she very much follows the problems stemming from the dictatorship in the Middle Eastern countries and other Islamic countries. And this Iranian politologist said that we often have difficulties when it comes to, having understanding tolerance and freedom. So we're willing to put freedom at risk for the sake of tolerance. This is a very complex space, but I like to reflect with you about this, because I understand that you've all thought about where the limits are, where we need to reach in order to, have a clear stance regarding specific problems. And it's very important that we analyze the present times from a critical standpoint.
Marta, si quieres empezar.
Marta, you want to start?
I again will start. May I check with the translator that you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. We do.
Sound has improved, but it also went silent. Okay. So, because women are, as I tried to say, at the point of the spear of those attacking society from the right, those attacking democratic forms of governance, we have to be careful when initiatives that they have sponsored are passed by a general public or accepted. But as you yourself have said, those are often unresolved or even weak situations within society itself, where thinking and acting have changed, but there isn't a settled way of understanding what's at stake and what it might mean. I'm not in particular talking about the burqa ban. I'm talking about questions of transgender rights and the way they might be accepted or restricted. Attacking women for the clothing that they wear has been popular forever. But of course, we know that when we attack women for wearing burqas or the hijab or the niqab, it's to attack people for a degree of otherness that is perceived as exiling such people from the tribe of us. It's socially divisive rather than inclusive, and it pretends that there's a clash of civilizations. It reduces all questions to what clothing people wear, which when you say it sounds as silly as it is. So let's just leave it aside for the moment. Well, let me return to what you said about the Iranian feminist, who I suppose, though it didn't quite come through in the translation, but I know this is the point, that feminists and people who are by no means anti-immigrant in Switzerland, like the Iranian feminist, felt that the burqa was repressive for women and that it's not such a bad thing to ban it. Okay, so let's talk about that as a question rather than talking about the legislation itself, which is inarguably meant to be socially divisive, the same way that it was that you couldn't raise a minaret above a certain height, even though there were maybe two mosques, mosque in Switzerland. This was meant as a provocation. So women often say that what they wear is a matter of choice, but I would say, how do we know what choice is? How do we know when our choices are driven by those who tell us what life should be and what should be a sign of modesty and self-respect? But when you tell people that they must fight over this, they're going to claim that it's a choice, right? But let's get to so I'm not dismissing this issue at all. It's going to continue because it's the visuality of women looking different. Whereas, of course, as we've often pointed out, women feeling that they have to wear high heels and skirts is itself seen as a choice, when anyone can tell you, if they're being honest, that that choice is driven by other things. My little example is that the governor of the state of New York is now under severe threat of being removed from office because of his approach toward the women who work for him, not even in most of the allegations in terms of touching them, but in terms of kind of saying things to them and demanding certain ways of looking. They said, one of the women who testified said that everybody knew that the governor liked women in high heels, and so every woman wore high heels. Well, is that a choice? Well, it's a choice, but it's a choice driven by a desire to have a certain status and favor in society. That's very obvious. I'm sorry, am I talking too long, or should I move on to the trans
it's
question?
Okay. It's okay, it's perfect.
The ability of transgender people to engage in the life that they desire has changed dramatically over the past decade, as we know. And in many places, there is a wholehearted acceptance of transgender people, and in other places, less so. In the United States, the people center and left have very little problem saying, if you claim that your true gender is different from your birth gender, that's your right, and we accept you as you are, as you wish to be. It has, not surprisingly, been a point of fear and terror promulgated on the right, who claim that transgender women will attack true women in locker rooms and in the bathroom. And again, it's an excuse. It's an excuse to attack women and use them as the point at which one knows that society is being destroyed by the progressive left. But I will say that in England, there's a very different situation in that there are many women who claim, many more women than in the United States, who are feminists, who say that there has been an effacement of the difference between sex and gender, that one cannot change one's biological sex. Whatever you do, you still are going to have the DNA that you were born with, and that the needs of women who are physically women are being ridden roughshod over. I don't find this a very potent argument, but I understand that there has been an effort, and it's actually understandable that this would be the case, that we don't recognize the distinction between sex as a biological fact of your genome and your gender, which is how you express your identity. There will continue to be battles fought over this because this is a new thing for society. We need to actually understand where we put our attention and effort. We need to understand who are raising serious questions and who are simply using the issue as a way of attacking women once again.
Sí, de hecho, precisamente.
Women who become men, it's always the men who become women.
Sí,
Yes, you are quite right, Martha. Because this is also like a challenge. We were mentioning some challenges or some things that the left has to rethink. But I think within feminism, also we have to rethink how we approach some debates that lead us not into conflict, but at least into disagreement. So this is a point we have to see from what point of view does feminism have to approach these kind of conflicts. So you have the floor, Marcelo. I think this is not really my debate. You have to be very careful, especially when you are talking publicly, and very, very careful. Well, let me interrupt you. I think the fight is not about men or women. I think also men have to fight this fight, because this is the future, and both men and women have to be feminist. Yes, Martha, yes, Imma. But I was going to say that it's not my thing to define how strategically or politically the concept of a woman is built. I don't think that is my subject matter. It doesn't correspond to me. But I think, according to what you say, I think historically feminism, beyond a specific, the specific question of the rights of women, which are core, central, of course, then there are three other issues that are very important. Historically, feminism has widened our range of rights and to increase the number and type of rights. Then also there is the enlargement from a quantitative point of view of who are the subjects of rights. So more subjects should enjoy rights. There should be subjects of rights. And then thirdly, something that is even more important and complex. I think historically, feminism has been questioning what we do understand, what do we understand by rights. So our notion of rights, there's not only a restricted number of rights, and restricted number of people enjoy those rights, but also they've said that we perceive rights in a very restrictive way. And I think this is what is happening nowadays with transgender people, with Afro-feminism. Precisely, these people, they're saying that this idea that our understanding of rights themselves is very restrictive. And I think in order to move on into a society where democracy is growing into more and more radical democracy, I think we have to face the debates that you've mentioned, and also Marta very courageously has mentioned. I think we should not sort of refuse any of these three subjects, especially the third one, that is that we should rebuild and enlarge the concept of rights itself. This is why this is a very hot debate now. And as Martha said, there are many questions being raised now that are new for the society. And also, to be very short, yes, to say that people like Angela Davis should be a benchmark, and this is why she's again in the core of all these political and feminist debates, because she is the embodiment precisely of these questions. It's not the fruit of a hazard that make us see this in the work of Bell Puig. Then secondly, transfeminism or the Afro-feminism of black feminism are now talking about these limits of our historical conception of rights. And then thirdly, as Martha said, I'd like to say that this new authoritarian thinking, the new radical right wing, they've got like three targets. One, women and LGBT movements. Then the Afro-descendant black communities. And then they do not accept climate change. They refuse climate change. So they are fighting these three main elements. So we have the fourth feminist global wave with all the LGBT, black, feminist, and all these debates and hot debates. They also attack the new anti-colonial and racist movement, and they also go against these new movements against these that fight to defend the planet, so for the new environmental emergency. So in those three axes, the main fights are being fought now in order to avoid a democracy regression in the future. And this is why they're targeting women. And I think Martha was very right when she said we have to be very careful, strategically speaking, to make a difference in between internal debates in the political or intellectual sphere and make this difference from the defense of such fields from the authoritarian movements. On the one hand, we've got internal dispute within feminism, and on the other hand, we have to defend the feminist movements against the totalitarian new ideas. So, on the one hand, we have to maybe knock down the statue of Columbus in Barcelona, and then something else is to fight another battle. We have all these anti-racist and anti-colonialist movements. They go beyond the authoritarian movements. They're also fighting patriarchy and other movements like fascism. They also denounce the structural racism in our societies. But I think what Martha, from the strategical point of view, is saying, it is very important. They've got their own internal debates, and what society is now seen as as debate about the definition of such issues. And then on the other hand, we have to defend these movements from the new totalitarian ideas. Yes, I think it is very important, says Imma, to make this different. I think internal debates have given way to the new waves of feminism. But I think little by little, they are given more of a voice. And sometimes when you question something, you make it weaker, and it should be the other way around. There are some issues that you've mentioned, that climate change, the feminism and the anti-racist movements. So there's this deconstruction of rights that lead us into a new space. So since the title of this festival is Here, and due to COVID, many of us can no longer meet here. And due to this pandemic year we're living, we're talking again about feminism and about production chains. So now more than ever, we have to refight the feminist fight in order to have a more equalitarian society, because now COVID is telling us, well, this is the way, ladies and gentlemen. There is also this war of the classes that seems to be sort of far away in time, but it is not so. And not only from the different point of views that you've mentioned, I think now also we see new movements that lead to more inequality and that really create huge gaps in between different social classes, and they're more difficult to sort of breach. And I think when this all started, it was becoming very urgent, the need for lockdown. So first, it was like a lockdown in the different neighborhoods. And COVID is telling us there is not social classes for a virus. But at the same time, there is, because it's not the same if you are locked down in a house with a garden or in a tiny flat. And it is funny also that some of the policies have been really punishing these areas, these neighborhoods where the most vulnerable people live, like the migrants, people with really scarce possibilities to make a living. So we see that there is not yet enough of a time decalage or to look backwards and to see this with a distance. But I'd like to ask you, where do you think we're aiming at?
Marcelo, si quieres seguir tú o Marta, me da igual. Marta?
Marcelo, would you like to say something, or Martha? Well, very fast, says Marcelo.
Brought up the issue of classes and the distribution of wealth in society, which what we've seen over the past 4 decades has been a tremendous flow upward of money. And what COVID has exposed, as you so rightly point out, and I'm sure this is true everywhere, it's the poorest who suffer the most. And at the same moment that they're considered, well, we'll say in English, in England, they're called, in the UK, they're called key workers. In the US, we call them essential workers. These are the people whose neighborhoods are most affected and who can't lock down because they have to provide the services for everybody else, and have also been least able to take advantage of the vaccination programs because they're harder to get to. It's harder to have their children be online with a secure connection in order to have remote learning. And every single thing that comes with a middle class or better life is exposed as starkly separating people from one another. And it it's been okay with everybody until it became glaringly obvious. So, of course, we need to talk about the fact that global wealth is being drastically redistributed, and also its relationship to climate change. Because if nothing else, and actually I had a conversation like this with two friends of mine, now the city centers in the United States are being devastated by the loss of business, especially in the hospitality sector, restaurants and neighborhood shops. And in the past, when this has happened, rich people have poured wealth back in because they want to live there and also take advantage of these services. Now, rich people are literally thinking about moving to Mars. It's not a joke. Why is Elon Musk trying to develop a flight to Mars? They have recognized, as do all corporate leaders, the reality of climate change. They leave the cities where there are lockdowns. They get on their yachts. They go to floating islands, which are real. And they are thinking about, well, we'll colonize maybe Mars, maybe the moon, because it's beyond hope to fix this. So we are in a position where finally the reality of global warming, which also, of course, brought us the COVID pandemic, and will bring us other ones. We've acknowledged that they are destroying our world for us, and the rich are not even thinking about how to repair it, or at least a large number of them. Or even we can say they may act one way as corporate figures, but as just rich people, they just leave. I will also say that one of the things I always loved about Angela Davis, whom you mentioned, Marcelo, and who I went to graduate school with, is that she's always been a woman of the left and has always reminded us that there are the pillars of oppression that you mentioned: race, class, and gender. And anything that I've forgotten, well, of course, colonial behavior, which is related to all of those.
Marcelo.
Sí, bueno, pues estar de acuerdo con lo que planteáis las dos.
Sí.
I agree with both of you, says Marcelo. A Brazilian thinker that is also a very good friend of mine, Sorel Ronick, she said this in a very short manner. The power of modernity is made of patriarchal, colonial, and capitalist matrix. So here we the three members of the Holy Family. So the movements against the climate change emergency and all these new totalitarian movements. So this is essential fight in modern times when we talk about emancipation. And in this outer space modernity is creating. I think power segregates and governs. Segregates in a very obvious way. Now we have a very clear example, this fantasy of fleeing, running away from planet Earth to run away from this collapse of our society. It has been historically provoked by modernity, and now the elites are even sort of pushing farther. But also, it is governing. Neoliberalism is the government of economy, as David Harvey very rightly says. And then there is also, as Michel Foucault used to say, there is this government of the souls. So there is this bridge in between producing ways of subjectivity that are related to this matrix of powers, there is where the fight is happening. This is what Marta says is very right. There is the identity, the recognition on the one hand, and then the issues related to the how to share wealth. And this is a dichotomy very well set by Nancy Fraser. I think she was very much at the core of these tensions, as you have explained. And of course, without any doubt, I think this global, pandemic has exacerbated this situation. And of course, it goes without any doubt or without any saying that now this is pushing the limits of all the political debates and health debate. And when you talked about this tension or this debate about biology, I very much like a work by Marta, The Strange Case of the Baby SM. This is a very early work on the subrogated motherhood or maternity. And there you have this work that tackles the political issue related to culture and biology. And they are not separated because biology is governed by the technology of the power. So there it is very clear. Not everything is the same. But these questions, I think we have to sort of interrelate them. And according to two of your questions, Imma, there we see very clearly that these questions related to reproduction, to the experience of life, this is very much related to issues and tensions that are political and biological, very clearly. So, and I think this is only exacerbated by the pandemic. Yeah, that is the case. Effectively, says Imma. In order to conclude, because then we're going to have some questions for our followers. I think I am getting some questions into my WhatsApp. Many of these lines we've been drawing, or these spaces we've been depicting, both Marcelo, Marta, and myself, talking about climate change, about the racist fight, the issues of migration, feminism, all these within a society, and conceived also thinking about care, about the policies. So we need a new way to create new relations in between all these, new correspondences or new links, because we are still separated. There are still big gaps in between all these issues. I think feminism is the ideology that can sort of encompass all these changes. And this has been so since the 20th century. It encompasses all these links, all these imperialisms that under the patriarchal gaze have been amputating all these spheres or fields that could have otherwise worked in a different way. So how do you think we could move forward? Do you think it is necessary to separate all these questions? I think all these spaces have to keep on having their own internal debates, but also somehow we have to also find a way to encompass and interlink all these subject matters.
Marta?
Yes, it's really important to point this out. I was very heartened to hear some of my favorite thinkers mentioned by Marcelo, including Sully Rolnick, Nancy Fraser, and David Harvey. And I'd like to mention that one of the people I was having this conversation about the present, the future, and even in my interpretation, the question of here was David Harvey last week, or 2 weeks ago. And he would like to point out, and I hope he doesn't mind my saying so, though I seriously doubt it, that we are in fact he's been trying to decide how we name the current era, which he sees as we agreed, the end of neoliberalism. He was suggesting that it's pre-fascist thought, and yet we understand very well what he's talking about. And of course, U.S. person, I can say, of course, if it can happen in the U.S., which it did, and we were just lucky to stop it for the moment, then certainly I can't think of that many countries of size that are exempt from a turn toward authoritarianism, which we might as well call fascism, because that's what we mean. But here's the better part of this conversation. Both he and I mentioned a novel. Actually, I thought of it at the time, a science fiction novel by a man of the left, China Miéville, called The City and the City. It's a slender book in which the premise is that there are two cities on the space of the city, and they are not mutually visible or experienced in the same way. The point being that, as I was bringing it up, the point is that what neoliberalism has done to people has been to try to sever the bonds of community and to sever the impulse toward cooperative behavior, which we see reemerging with every catastrophe, whether it's a storm or other crises and financial crises as well, where self-help groups, and in the United States, mostly formed by women and women of color during the pandemic. And what we must continue to do is to develop spaces of cooperation and solidarity, which of course has been a feature of the left since the left became the left. But it's crucial to stress the importance of restoring our attention to forms of cooperation and fight your enemies, but work with your friends and attempt to change discourses through training our children not to simply be greedy people who have to secure as much of the public resources as possible, which is the American way, but rather to figure out how to work together to remake society from below. Now, that sounds very old-fashioned because it's the way human beings have operated forever. But we need to be stressing the need to continue this now. It's not utopian if it's a matter of survival.
Sí. Marcelo, ¿quieres añadir?
Marcelo, do you want to add something? Yes, I completely agree with her. And I like to insist on what Martha is saying. In political debates, we see that we are addressing once again the idea of the commons. And that's because neoliberalism was very much defined by Margaret Thatcher, who said that society does not exist. And what she meant to say was that society is made up of individuals that compete against each other. And that's why we don't need to have a state that offers public services. The state intervenes so that in that fight among individuals, it is the elites that win. But there's something that needs to be mentioned regarding this quote by Margaret Thatcher, and it's the fact that neoliberalism cannot survive without cooperation. And we've seen this since the financial crisis of 2007. Banks have burst, and banks have exploited solidarity among family members, among friends. And these solidarity chains have been used by the financial system to exploit them and to produce chains of indebtment, if I may say. It's not true that society doesn't exist. What exists is social cooperation governed by elites. That's what neoliberalism is about. And I'd like to say something else. We need to build communities. We need to make sure that we leave to one side the far right, because the far right talks about us. And let's take care of us. The far right says that we need to look after ourselves and against others. We need to make sure that we rebuild the concept of community, that we rebuild those social ties. We need to make sure that it isn't the radical right or the authoritarians who decide or shape these communities. We need to look after each other in an inclusive manner. We need to make sure that the borders of our community are open borders. This is essential, because if not, the far right will say, well, since we are living a time of crisis, let's make sure that migrants aren't allowed to come in. No, we need to avoid that. We need to have open borders. Let's make sure that those far right trends are controlled. We need to have policy, as Martha was saying, and I'd like to thank her for sharing that conversation with Hardy and other friends. We need to build an us, politics of us, of communities, but we need to make sure that borders are porous, are open. We need to have diverse communities. We cannot have homogeneous communities where we're all white, heterosexual. No, we need to make sure that communities have porous borders, that our communities are diverse. They need to have inner and outer borders that are porous, that are open, because it's taken us decades and decades to rebuild society. It's taken us decades to rebuild communities. It's taken us decades to sustain our communities vis-a-vis neoliberalism. We cannot, take a step back and allow for Bolsonaro to decide how Brazil needs to be. No, that cannot be allowed. Let's make sure that we, in a plural and a diverse manner, can decide how we want to rebuild society. We need a society that is inclusive inwards and outwards, both things. I completely agree with you, and I believe that it's an excellent wrap. We are reaching the end of this session that was scheduled from 7 to 8 p.m. I completely agree with you, and perhaps one last sentence. Thanks, Marcelo. That was the perfect wrap. Thanks very much to both of you. And to end, I'd like to share with you an image. And I'm going to share with you the image of an artist and friend who talks about us. We're all us. And this artist reflects on the nos otros. The Spanish term nosotros, us, is made up of nos and otros, others. Thank you very much, Marta. Thanks very much, Marcelo. You're a true inspiration for all of us. I'd like to thank all the attendees for all. I'd like to thank everybody who has followed us online. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope we can see you soon. And I'd also like to thank the organizers, the festival, and I wish you the best during the upcoming sessions of the festival. Thanks very much. Oh my goodness, this was extremely short. Yes, I agree. I thought we had 2 hours, but it was just 1 hour, I'm afraid. And probably we could continue talking for hours. There could, I had to restructure the session when I learned that we only had 1 hour available, but we could, of course, talk about all these issues for hours. Well, I hope we can engage in this conversation again in the future with a glass of wine, face to face, to be able to see us in person. Thanks very much. Thanks, Imma, and thanks, Marta. It's always a pleasure to listen to you, madam.
Share with you, even if
very
it's
much
through the screen.
enjoy hearing my fellow participants. And I also need to thank the technicians who managed to fix the sound problem, which made all the difference.
Absolutely. So, well, thank you, and hope to see you soon,
Chao.
both of you. Bye.
And now everything is silent.
Yeah, maybe nobody listens us. I don't know.
No sabemos si hay alguien nunca por ahí.
No, la verdad es que no. Bueno, chicos, yo voy a cerrar. Estoy en el museo y también tengo como una parte de técnicos que se quieren ir a casa y de hecho...
I'll leave it here because I'm speaking from the museum and I have to leave. Bye-bye.
Chao.